Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a global media personality, an author, and a speaker too, no other than Mr. Rod Berger.
How are you, Daniel?
I'm fabulous, Dr. Rod. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Absolutely. So I have a background in media, journalism, and psychology, and I have been a storyteller in different sectors of the economy and captured stories around the world. And I know we're here. We're going to talk about my new book that that's going to be hitting bookstores in just a few months. My publisher Wiley and the book is called The Narrative Edge: Authentic Storytelling That Meets the Moment, and it is a collection of stories that I've captured across my travels, everywhere from refugee camps in Eastern Africa to going behind the scenes at Formula One. And I weave in personal stories and the way in which story has impacted me across my lifetime.
Dr. Rod Berger, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. What's the narrative edge you describe in the book, and why is it critical advantage today?
Well, it's critically important. It's interesting, Daniel, that you asked that because I just saw a study that came out from MIT where they're looking at the impact of ChatGPT and AI on critical thinking, and that those that are utilizing AI and these different models are losing or slipping in their ability to think critically. And when I think about that, I think about story, I think about writing, I think about capturing the essence of a shared experience, a shared glass of wine, a trip across an ocean, a picnic, a game, a parent-child interaction. And it's about story, and it's about relaying those stories. So I think that, look, story's been with us since the dawn of time. It will never leave us, but I think our ability to think visually, to think compassionately about others and the world around us is expressly discussed and shared through the power of story. And it's just so important. And part of that, Daniel, is the father in me coming out. And part of it is the individual that has had just such incredible once-in-a-lifetime moments that only story could help to support the retelling of. So I think it's really, really important in a world of AI where the answers are going to be provided. We're going to have to ask good questions, and good questions are a part of and ride shotgun with curiosity. And we've got to be aware of that. And so I think it applies to every sector. And really, it's one of the reasons why noted publications like Harvard Business Review have it on their cover what feels like every other month, because everybody, regardless of where they work or the position that they hold, story is an important part of that.
Dr. Rod, how do you define authentic storytelling in a world saturated with content and AI-generated narratives?
So how do I define authentic in this world? It's a great question, Daniel. Authenticity is much more, I think, defined by silence than it is volume. And it's really hard to be authentic when we feel like we have to fill the airspace with content that's generated from something outside of ourselves and our experiences. It's interesting because people will, especially in the content space, they will talk about the replacement of people and everything from public relations to publicity, marketing, and communications sort of writ large. Well, I always go by the motto of garbage in, garbage out. And so, if I'm going to be authentic and I'm going to communicate a message, whether that's through a book like mine, or it's in somebody's email copy for sales, or if they're trying to communicate a brand or something new through advertising, if it doesn't come from a place of authenticity, the reader, the viewer, the consumer, the customer, they feel it. But you know why? Because it lacks emotion. And AI can do a lot of things, but what it can't do is communicate that emotion in a way that can pivot in the moment. And I think that that's incredibly important. So being authentic is it's about being and really feeling good about where you are in your space and the story you're about to tell. And it's also being comfortable with the silence. And that's something that you can't square with AI or in a synthetic world. Sometimes it's in the power of a look. Well, how am I going to tell an AI engine or model to take in and understand a look within what we're talking about here? So being authentic is about understanding that we're all going through this together. And if we can share our experiences, chances are, and I'm not a betting man, but I would put a healthy bet down that if I can communicate about the human experience, chances are, Daniel, that others will resonate with that.
Dr. Rada, beautifully articulated.
I love your studio audience, Daniel.
Yes, there's a lot. Very well said. The subtitle mentions stories that meet the moment. How does context like cultural, social, or technological shape effective storytelling?
So we're talking about meeting the moment and cultural expression or experience. I mean, it's so fascinating because, you know, the irony is when people think about storytelling, I'll hear people say, Daniel, oh, it's just a fad. You know, we'll sidestep this in a little while. But actually, we think about storytelling all the time. If you get pulled over by a police officer for speeding, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? What's my story? If you go and have a cup of coffee with a potential client or colleague that you've never met before, you're going to be thinking as you walk into that cafe, what story or stories am I going to tell that represent the best of me or the opportunity of collaborating with me? If it's a first date, what story am I going to tell when I shake that person's hand or give them a hug to start that date? It's everywhere. Right? If one of my kids does something that they know they're going to get in trouble for, what's the first thing they think about? What story am I going to tell my father? And so cultural practices play a role in this because there are expectations, there are assumptions, there are biases that play a role in the way in which we communicate our experience. And so whether we want to call it story or reflection, or really just sort of broad-based honesty, it is a part of what we do, and it's the way in which we communicate. And the understanding of other cultures is incredibly important. And I'll give you an example. So in my book, I talk about experiences that I've had in Africa, Daniel. And I walked in, my very first time in Africa was in Western Africa, in Dakar in Senegal, and then in the Tambacounda region, which is about 7 hours into the country. And I started noticing that I was getting looks from young Senegalese. And it was fascinating because they were looking at me as if I was an animal in a zoo that they'd never seen before. And, you know, sort of silly me or shame on me that I hadn't already thought about the impact of my white skin, my hair, whatever I'm wearing, what was it communicating to those young children? Had they ever seen a white face before? And so I started to ask the people around me, what do they call somebody with a white face? And I did that purposefully. And when I found out what they called people with a white face, I started to use it in my interactions with people where it seemed appropriate, because I wanted them to know that I understood I was in their home, and I wanted to communicate a sense of dignity and pride for their home or their environment, their country. And I didn't want to be ignorant as the perceived colonist or somebody who is coming to tell them how to do something better, like to purify their water or to dig a well or to improve education for young girls. And so I use that as a general practice, Daniel, every time that I've been to Africa in different regions. And I will tell you, it's some of the experiences I have with people when I acknowledge that I know what the term is. The walls go down, and you just have a connection with another human being that says, you matter, and I respect your home. And I think that's a really important thing to do. So I think when it comes to culture and the role of storytelling, it's sort of understanding. And here's what else. I don't know what your next question is going to be, Daniel, but I will say that one of the things that we struggle in, and I talk about in the book, is understanding the character that we play in the story that we live. And do we have control over the characters that we play in the stories that we live? Or are those roles being applied to us based on circumstance, based on any number of ism or issue or bias, unfairly or fairly attributed, and that can impact the way in which we think about our role in this life?
Yes, people, respect begets respect. So, what's the biggest misconception about storytelling that your book challenges?
The biggest assumption about storytelling is that it's a nice to have. Is that it's nice when we want to sit down and maybe, get close with our loved ones and watch a movie on the couch.
Yes.
That's when story is nice. Or story is nice when it's somebody's birthday, or it's a Valentine's Day, or it's some holiday where you are conveying your love or appreciation for somebody through the means of a Hallmark card, right? So a corporation that put down words in a way that says, I don't know how to do this, but these people over here, they do. And so I'm going to sign my name to it that says I love this person, or I care about them, or congratulations, or and so I think that the misconception is that we don't really need story, right? It's cute. It's a nice to have, but I think it's essential. It's absolutely essential. You think about the times where you've had conflict, and especially in personal relationships. And this does apply to professional as well. But when there's conflict, Daniel, when you want to get through that, what's one of the best ways of doing that? Relaying a story of the way in which, in essence, if you and I were in conflict, if I shared a story about how you have impacted me, or the way in which I am experiencing you and or what you had communicated with me, right? And if I do that through story, I personalize it, it humanizes it, and it gives you an opportunity to connect on that level, and we'll probably then find a solution.
Dr. Rod, how does the narrative edge redefine the relationship between truth and storytelling in business and leadership?
Truth. Truth is, it's sometimes I think truth can almost be like, you've got a bug flying around you at a picnic or something, and you can't get it out of your face. You don't know where it is. You don't know at what stage you're going to have to express it, or if someone is either not being truthful with you in the stories that they share. But I will say that story is an opportunity to convey truth and honesty, right? It does give you a platform to be able to do that. I hearken back to, and I talk about this in the book, but I worked for almost 2 decades with Vanderbilt University's business school with their graduate students. And I worked with them on storytelling in business. And it was always interesting to me, Daniel. And in the beginning, I didn't understand it. And then it became so frequent that I just figured this is just sort of the way in which these students matriculate through life, and they then come to me, which is to say they would present their resumes. Well, their resumes, Daniel, were truthful in what they communicated, their grades that they had achieved, their apprenticeships or internships, their extracurricular activities, but that the truth was really buried. It's like we're burying the lead, which is they weren't telling their truth about their own story. They were telling the truth that they thought was expected of them by faculty, by their profession, and they didn't understand the value of the story that lied beneath those elements and those bullet points that they shared exclusively with every other colleague and classmate in there, all the while not differentiating themselves or illustrating or demonstrating their uniqueness in why on earth anybody would want to hire them, bring them on into an internship, and collaborate with them. And so I think truth is, it sort of lives within the gray, right? It's not black or white. And I think sometimes it's just the question that helps us get to it. I don't think it's about the answer. I think it's the pursuit of that. You and I may be in an elevator that stops between two floors. Well, there can be two truths that we're stuck between two floors, but it does also give us an opportunity to find a new truth from a different perspective and platform. And that's going to happen through shared experiences. And shared experiences packaged together are stories.
Again, Dr. Rod, very well said. My audience cheering you up because empowering answer indeed. As a global media personality, an author and a speaker, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
We must be related, Daniel. I feel like I get this question quite a bit from inside the four walls of my life. My short-term goals, I hope, Daniel, that this book, I hope it touches people. I hope, it's interesting. Whenever I do my interviews, and I feel very old because I've done over 4,000, but when I'm doing an interview, I don't ever think about it in the moment, or prior to an interview. But part of my goal is that I want you to have an experience that you've never had before. I want to ask you a question that came organically in the moment that you've never been asked, even if you've been interviewed 1,000 times. Because that to me is sort of the magic of human interaction. If I can do that, then I've done my job. Well, in writing the book, it converted a little bit. It wasn't just that I couldn't think of the reader in the same way. And as I started to share the manuscript with a select group of people, I started getting feedback that was, to me, the equivalent of what I was hoping for during interviews, which was they found themselves within the stories that I was sharing, as if they were a character in that given play. That, to me, is the greatest compliment for a storyteller, is that whatever I did, and hopefully I did more right than wrong, I provided an opportunity and a staircase for others to step onto the same stage and to share a story that maybe they hadn't been to a place that I have been, but they've had that experience where the environment or the background might have been different. And so my short-term goal is that the book is experienced with the intent that I originated this from, which is to express dignity and appreciation for the people that honored me with the opportunity to understand their lives and share their lives with the masses. And my long-term goal is that hopefully the book does well enough that it, breeds opportunity to capture more stories. Because that's the problem with storytelling. There's one problem, Daniel. If you allow yourself to enjoy the vast and unending horizon of story, you never want to leave. It is like returning a rental car. When you cross over the spikes at the airport, you can't back up. And when you have seen stories that you had never could have thought would be a part of your landscape, it's an addiction. You want more. You want to dive in deeper. You want to find a different medium, a different way to do that. And so long-term goals include my work with the Jim Henson Company on our television show, and hopefully that will get picked up and we can capture stories around the world for that show, and that more books will follow. But that's all. That all happens if people continue to welcome me into their proverbial homes, which I greatly appreciate.
Yes, and we want more. Dr. Rod, we want more empowering books from you. And good luck to your goals in life. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there want to be an author or global media personality as well as speaker?
Okay, well, I'll try to tie it in as concisely as I can. I guess really it's about, if you find that you have a passion for storytelling, you'll find the medium where you're the most comfortable. It may be that it's on a stage giving a TED Talk, or it might be that it's behind a computer typing stories and columns for publications of record, or of a discipline that connects with you personally. And within your spirit of what you want to convey. So I think it's really about, if you want to dive into storytelling, because that's what it is, there are all these incredible mediums to be able to do it. and you find where you fit that natural sort of, this is comfortable for me. And if you find that it's comfortable, then I think you dive all the way in. But you will not go without, I think, an incredible journey and opportunity to learn from those around you in an ever-changing world that you and I both know, Daniel, is changing by the second in so many ways. And it's going to be hard to, I think, track as humans with the development. And so if we can do so through story, all the better.
All the better for sure. Dr. Rod, thank you for your advice. And what future trend, like social media or technological or cultural, do you believe will most reshape storytelling, and how can we prepare?
Wow, that's a great question, Daniel. I'm going to have to remember that one. How is it going to reshape storytelling? I think that there's going to be, it's potentially a slippery slope, meaning that if I'm a young person and I'm learning how to write and compose, prose that is emotional, that provides information, that educates, if I start to find that I can subvert some of that through technology, then I can see why the study that came out of MIT recently was showing the drastic impact around critical thinking, or the lack thereof, for those that had been using the technology. And so I think we're going to have to be aware, because if we think that the technology is not going to be at a point tomorrow, the next day, or next year that can weave emotion into content and story, then I think we are already losing the battle, if there is a battle to be won. I think this is just about gaining a much deeper understanding of ourselves so that we can be discerning consumers of information and stories. That will help us to be better storytellers and to understand our role in a world that we all of a sudden have to share now with technology.
Dr. Rod, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please to listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my Abstract Essay is already in 5th season, Abstract Poetry in 2nd season, and of course my Book 101 review in 5th season too. Comedy 101 in 2nd season, and my Food 101 in its 5th season as well. Geography 101 in 4th season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in 4th season, as well as my Movie 101 review, Music 101, and my Science 101 and Sex 101 in its 1st season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Dr. Rod, if you could leave readers with one mindset shift about storytelling from the narrative ads, what would it be?
Thank you, Daniel, and congratulations on your storytelling portfolio. That's incredibly impressive, and I would encourage people to check out more of Daniel and his stories. I think the lasting piece that is tied to the book would be, if you are not in control of your story, who is?
Who is, people? Dr. Rod Berger. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And we are hoping for more and more and more empowering books to come. So can you please invite our listeners to support your books, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Thank you, Daniel. Well, if they would like to pre-order the book, they can go to my website, which is drrodberger.com/book, and they can also pre-order anywhere books are sold. And I'll say this, Daniel, that those that pre-order will also be receiving a lost chapter. You never know. Maybe you'll be in my lost chapter, Daniel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Rod Berger. And please, people, let's support Dr. Rod Berger, because if you support him, as I said, more and more empowering books like this to come, more and more empowering coaching, or more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Dr. Rod, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.